All right, good afternoon. How's everyone feeling? Been an enjoyable summit? Excellent. All right, well, we've got one more for you this afternoon. We've got Dan and Jacob coming up to talk about AWS, scaling, and how you can improve your infrastructure with that. So please welcome up to the stage, Jacob and Dan.
Awesome. Cool. Can you hear me? All right, awesome. My name is Jacob Coakley. I'm an SI practice manager at AWS. Been with the company 2 years, and we have Dan Frost, head of partnerships, with us as well. So appreciate you guys being here. Those of you, if you're here right at like 4:20 on the end of the summit, you're very invested. So we appreciate you being here and listening to us. So we're going to run through what we've done, how we partnered with cPrime and Atlassian on a migration program. So we want to start by talking about AWS on a high level. So we level set, how we're doing as a company, who we are at Atlassian and AWS's joint approach. Talk specifically about Jira migrations, and then a program that we've developed that we think is pretty unique that you can take advantage of, hopefully. So with that said, from stepping back a bit, AWS overall, right? Currently, we just announced in Q2 earnings, and we're now a $6.1 billion business, growing 49% year over year. Millions of active customers every month. Growing at that rate is pretty incredible, the scale that we deal with and the pace of innovation that we move on a business of that size. One of the stories, so I was talking with one of our SAs, and he shared an anecdote with me of he was going into a large investment bank in EMEA region, and he was saying, it was a while we were trying to get out there in front of this customer because they were, a financial institution and a little, they weren't as open to speaking with us initially, and about a year later they invited us out to talk around DevOps and whiteboard the whole DevOps story of AWS and how you want to utilize AWS and agile culture and all of that. And so he goes, we get into the meeting, and the CIO shows up with him, about 10 of his direct reports around this old school wooden table, right? And he starts whiteboarding, right? Hour session, like 45 minutes in. This is how we approach Agile. This is how we approach DevOps. This is the whole culture we have around AWS. And this was a net new customer at AWS, right? Someone that hadn't really dove deep into migrating workloads or using any AWS services. They had their own hesitations. And so he gets to the end of the session and looks at their CIO, and the CIO looks at our SA, and he's like, "Hey, this is great, Danny, but what if everything you described, we have the exact opposite culture here? It's that we're slow, we don't move quickly, we don't really talk between teams. It's just the exact opposite of everything you described. Like, what are you going to do?" And he's like, I looked over, and all the 10 direct reports kind of looked back like, well, we got him. Like, we got this guy, this poor sucker at AWS. And so our SA just said, well, you know what? Maybe then it's not the time for us to engage with you, and we're not the partner of choice right now. And it doesn't make sense for us to work together. He's like, I said this sitting next to our sales rep, whose job out hit the table, right? Because he'd been trying to get in front of this customer for so long. There was a long pause. And then we'll call him Bob, the CIO. He looked at his team and he said, you know what? This is why AWS will win in this space, because they won't back away from their culture, right? So culture is huge to us, and the whole DevOps, why we're here at Atlassian, the whole culture around AWS. We have this notion of leadership principles of how we operate, how we hire against customer obsession, bias for action. These type of things are what's driving us to these new heights. We were the fastest IT enterprise vendor to reach a $10 billion business. So I've been at AWS 2 years, and it's funny to look back, right? We were bragging about that 2 years ago, and now flash forward to where we are today. We're now on a $24 billion run rate, which is just massive, the scale that we operate at. We've done, in our history at AWS, over 87,000 databases we've migrated into AWS using database migration service. On an average week, customers are using more compute capacity on spot instances than all of EC2 compute back in 2012. So our customers are getting more sophisticated understanding of the pricing models of AWS, how you can purchase and use compute power on demand. And one thing that I love about working at AWS, right, as a company, we've reduced prices 67 times since our inception, before AWS rolled around, you weren't really seeing that in the market. That was something unheard of, but one thing that, again, embodies the culture of AWS, right? We want to have a customer-obsessed viewpoint and really do what's in the best interest of the customer, and we leverage the scale that we operate in to provide price benefits and discounts to our customers. So what we're seeing is this adoption where cloud computing has become the new normal. It's less of customers asking us why cloud, but more, hey, how can we get there more quickly? We know the inherent benefits, right, of the agility, scalability, et cetera, help us move faster, which is what we're going to talk about, how we're doing that specific to Atlassian workloads. And really what AWS provides on top of that, right, is we take care of the undifferentiated heavy lifting for our customers, right? We provide the infrastructure so that way businesses can focus on what they do best and how they deliver value to customers. We have this notion of the shared responsibility model where AWS takes care of everything up to the operating system from a hardware perspective, so that way our customers can achieve greater security footprints, right, leveraging AWS, because the customer just has to worry about securing from the operating system up. And one of my favorite quotes is from Rob Alexander, who's the CIO of Capital One, and he says, we're actually more secure in AWS than we were on premises because it allows us to focus on what we're doing at the application layer and on top of the infrastructure. We don't have to worry about those security vulnerabilities that we had to in the past. So that's a pretty compelling reason, right? Everyone has different motivations for moving, some for security, innovation, and really, we've seen virtually any workload is deployed in AWS with millions of active customers, the amount of raw demand and compute capacity that we're leveraging. It's pretty impressive scale. And I've talked about scale a couple times, and I want to dive into what's the difference in how we define regions and availability zones and edge locations, because simply how we construct our data centers gives us a unique advantage in the market. And we were obviously first to market and came up with this concept of regions, right, that many of you may be familiar with. Today, we have 18 different regions spread globally with 55 availability zones. So if you take a snapshot at any one specific region, right, we'll look at US East 1 as a specific example, and we have within that region 6 availability zones, and within an availability zone is made up of 1 or more data centers, which from a technological standpoint gives our customers the ability to achieve high availability, durability, resiliency, just simply from the way that we're architected. And I think it's important to learn and understand because customers have questions around it and are needing help understanding how they can take advantage of. And we have announced regions. We're constantly expanding this footprint. We're continuing to innovate as a company, and we have regions announced in Bahrain, Hong Kong, and Sweden coming online in the next few months. Want to take a minute and walk through a customer story of a software customer that was running a Jira workload, and they were having a challenge where they were growing at just a crazy scale of 15,000 tickets per month that they were having to keep pace with, and they were deployed all on premises. And they came to us with this challenge of, hey, we're facing this huge growth and this scale issue where anytime we try and do patches or version upgrades, et cetera, we can't have downtime because we have so many customers, but we have this scale issue where we're growing quickly, and we just can't keep up with that demand. And so we worked with their team and really were able to build a solution, leverage that infrastructure that we talked about in our availability zones and the scale of Amazon overall, right, as a $24 billion run rate business to solve for that and help them achieve in their Jira workload specifically the ability to scale on demand and grow. And many of you probably know this customer and heard of it, but it was actually Atlassian that we worked with, and this is what one of their engineers on the project said, right? We were able to scale our application using Amazon EFS and reduce the amount of time it would have taken to spin up new customers from if not months, weeks, to down to minutes, leveraging the on-demand compute capacity and the power really of AWS overall. So I think that's a really compelling story and leads into this migration story that we have delivered jointly with Atlassian, because we've really taken a joint approach to solve this challenge for our customers. It might not be on the same scale that we're working with Atlassian directly, but we've leveraged those learnings into best practices so that way customers can migrate with reduced risk and reduced fear around what that migration looks like and what that path is. And there's a few different mechanisms that we're using to support customers in that regard. One of them is a quick start, where you can go and, we've invested a lot of resource engineer hours with the Atlassian team in parallel to build these quick starts where they're ready-made deployment guides of, hey, I want to spin up a Jira workload in AWS. How do I go about doing that? And it's you follow it. It's about a 5-minute process, and what you end up with is your own VPC, leveraging Amazon RDS, internet gateways, load balancing, et cetera. And it just shows the commitment that we have to ensuring our customers have a good migration story, right? So whatever that reason is that they're looking to migrate, whether it's reduced TCO of moving into the cloud so they can leverage cost benefits of moving, or the scalability that we talked about so they can scale up quicker, better security, or simpler management. Customers are coming to us all the time with these types of challenges, and we're able to solve for that more efficiently, leveraging the relationship that we have with Atlassian. Through that, what we have developed is a migration framework that delivers and really enables our customers. We meet our customers where they are to simplify that migration story, leveraging those best practices in the form of a playbook. So that way, when a customer comes to us and says, hey, we want to move into AWS, how can we get there? We have a whole methodology and framework around that where it's a defined scope, so it's not going to be a project that goes, grows tentacles and sprouts, and it changes every 6 months what the end game looks like. It's defined, hey, this is going to be a 6-week engagement, it's going to be an 8-week engagement, depending on the workload size and what you're trying to do, whether it's prove out an existing concept and dip your toes in the water in AWS, or it's more of a full-on transformation type of initiative, right, and moving forward in that regard, and leveraging some of the best practices. The way I like to think about it, right, is I'm a big Lakers fan. And so back in the day, they had Shaq and Kobe and Derek Fisher, and the triangle offense was how they won a few different championships. So you think about it from a people, process, and technology standpoint, as in this triangle offense of the Lakers. So wherever the business is, whether it's moving more towards a people transformation process or if it's a technological transformation, really this framework helps address those concerns that customers have and accelerate their migrations into AWS. In addition to the framework, we've developed a few tools to continue to accelerate these migrations in the form of playbooks and also quick starts that I mentioned before. And one of the things we've done as well is really invest heavily into our partner community. cPrime being a great example, and then we'll hear from them in a minute of what they're doing in this space. But we invest in them both from a technical resource perspective to validate their best practice in a number of other areas to really ensure that our customers have a great migration story, and it's a really easy business decision to move forward with their migrations. Many of you may have seen this before, but this is our cloud adoption framework and stages of cloud adoption of where different customers are. And we're seeing it, there's customers all at different stages, whether it's that investment bank that I talked about earlier at the start. They're looking at maybe a small project, just something to get their feet wet with AWS. Or we have companies now that are full on, born in the cloud. Anywhere in between, we have a methodology again where it's moving from that foundation layer of getting the infrastructure set up and leveraging the compute to more transformation type initiatives, leveraging DevOps, agile methodologies to really solve for whatever the business challenges that customers are facing. Specific to Jira, some of the common use cases that we're seeing within our customers as they're coming to us is one being they have multiple instances. There's different teams, disparate groups within an organization where they've gone. It's a very self-service model. So Atlassian and AWS have a similar culture where it's a consume on your own self-service of using the services. And so sometimes what will happen is there will be customers, whether it's enterprise or mid-market, where they have a number of different Jira instances and they're looking to consolidate into one, and that's driving their migration into AWS because they'll consolidate and move and migrate all in one together. So a consolidation play. Others, there's performance challenges where on-prem they're having issues around managing it, and they're not getting the performance they need because the scale could be an issue. So they're looking to migrate to AWS to really solve for some of those issues as well. And then cost and security are two other drivers that we're seeing customers move into AWS at a more rapid pace. So with that, to talk through some of those reasons that customers are moving and some real-life examples, I want to invite Dan to talk through what he's seen and, from a cPrime perspective.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Dan Frost. I'm with cPrime. I'm the head of partners. A little bit about cPrime. We are an Atlassian Platinum solution partner. We're also partners with AWS. It's kind of a great combination. The foundation of our business is with, we've got a very mature agile tooling and agile coaching and DevOps practices, and we also do managed hosting and managed services. I just wanted to get that out there. I don't doubt y'all know about Amazon and AWS, and cPrime sometimes needs an introduction. So I want to reinforce some of the benefits of the Amazon Cloud, AWS, that we see with our customers, like the things that when we're migrating Atlassian workloads, what do people talk about? And one of them is scalability, the ability to scale forever and ever and ever in an on-demand way. The next is customer and product focus. So just that simplicity in infrastructure management, so you can focus on making great products and worry less about infrastructure management. And in addition to that, there's just so many great services that come right along with the platform that it just makes life quite a bit easier. You can focus on being, the company you want to be or need to be, and less about the IT side. And then, of course, there's cost. You don't have to buy server and service capacity, to meet some infrequent busy times, and you don't have to do that up front. It truly is kind of pay as you scale, pay as you grow. So our approach has been technically validated by AWS. It's within kind of their AWS best practices guidance. And these are some of the steps we follow through. I know these are very, very high level. I also would just like to acknowledge we've been 2 days of Summit, and let's not go too deep. Let's take a breath, get ready for Bash. But one of the things that we do that we've got capability in because of our experience with Atlassian is first actually looking at the tool sets that we're going to migrate, really at the application and user experience level, and just make sure that those are kind of tuned up and aligned. The last thing we want to do is migrate something that's maybe a bit messy or needs some work into another environment, because then we're not really solving a user experience problem. So we like to do that and at least assess it. And the next thing is kind of falling back and making sure we've properly identified the benefits. Like I said, scale, cost, simplicity, and infrastructure. It's just helpful that everybody appreciates how great the future is going to be when you're on AWS. Then we do architecture and service mapping. We look at how you're deployed today, what those systems and processes look like, and map them over to their AWS, kind of the evolved version of that in the cloud. And then it's your typical ETL migration, extract, transform, load. It's funny to summarize it in that way because a lot of times it gets interesting, and it's not as easy as 3 simple words, but it is a pretty standard process. Then of course, just like the end of that cloud adoption curve had retire the technical debt. You're going to go in, validate the new environment, and then slowly decommission the old one. And so there's often testing rounds throughout, but it's pretty straightforward. And you can get the benefit right away. So we've established that AWS is the best cloud solution out there, in our opinion as well. We've established that cPrime has quite a bit of experience migrating, but in what context? In what ways? How can you use Atlassian on AWS? So there's 3 ways. One is cPrime has a managed hosting offering. You can deploy into an AWS environment that we're going to manage for you, fully offloading that responsibility. You hear terms like managed services, managed hosting, managed support, manage something, manage, you're not going to have to do it, we're going to take care of that for you. And that's all deployed on AWS. Secondly, same icon for continuity. We can deploy it into an AWS environment that you manage. It doesn't matter to us. We're just happy that you're using great cloud technology. And then lastly, the big surprise that, well, not big surprise for me, but I find people still somehow don't know about this. We were chatting about this ahead of time, is the Atlassian cloud products run on AWS. So we can migrate you into, with any of these deployment options, and you're still going to get the benefits of the Amazon cloud. So I wanted to give a couple of examples. First one is a global entertainment and travel company. Their applications were hosted with a smaller, kind of singular 1 or 2 data center hosting company, and they started to experience some stability issues. The funny thing about stability issues is that they very quickly turn into cost issues, because how do you fix them? You throw more server capacity and you buy more hardware and you ramp up. So it was stability, but then it was also cost. So they didn't have things like high availability. They didn't have DR. They really couldn't scale. So what we did is we built out with the Atlassian data center products, an implementation, AWS Base. It actually came into our managed hosting environment. Multi-AZ RDS, which in non-AWS speak means high availability databases. I think those 6 cups of coffee are starting to catch up with me. EFS, ELBs, and yeah, it just was a good experience for everyone. Problem solved, nothing too fancy. Another example here, electronic hardware company. In this case, we migrated into an environment that they managed. And in this case, they were actually coming from Atlassian cloud products. And the challenges they were having was that they actually kind of needed to get deeper into their own Atlassian data than they could with the Atlassian cloud, which happens sometimes. And thankfully, there's Atlassian server and Atlassian data center products that allow you to dig a little bit deeper where necessary. So we deployed them actually onto Atlassian server products and stuck it into an AWS environment that they managed. One of the other issues that they were worried about was data encryption. We have a lot of clients that are in the medical and financial services spaces, so like encryption at rest and encryption in transit is pretty critical. So again, just moving into their own cloud environment. Kind of back to what you were saying about the Capital One CIO, they felt they were more secure in their new deployment. So I'm going to recap again. Hey, Zubin. We established AWS, best cloud offering out there, in our opinion. cPrime's got experience. We got a bunch of deployment options too. Cited a couple examples, but we still haven't really talked about how can we get you into the cloud. How can we do that? How can we make that easy for you? So I mentioned that cPrime and AWS have partnered to migrate people to accelerate their migration to the Amazon cloud. I should also mention that we have a really great program to accelerate your process in getting there. There's 2 really big components of it. One is we're going to subsidize, and by we I mean Amazon and cPrime, the cost of your migration. So we did some analysis and looked at what kind of pro-serve fees are involved in actually migrating people to their own managed AWS environment, to cPrime managed hosting on AWS, or to Atlassian Cloud. And we figured out it's on average around $9,000. So that's what we're doing. We're going to make that, that's kind of our benchmark of what we're going to use to subsidize. So it's kind of up to $9,000. Now, of course, some folks have really massive deployments. And when they get bigger, we're going to work with Amazon and figure out how to take care of you guys. But the idea here is that we're going to remove that barrier to going to the cloud. The second one is with Amazon credits, the first 3 months of hosting are going to be free. So that's pretty cool too. Yeah, I guess that's kind of it. I mean, I shouldn't say kind of it. That's pretty cool, right? Subsidized migration costs, 3 free months on the cloud. That's pretty great. There's like pretty much no reason not to do it now, which leads right into my next slide. What should you do? Well, contact us. We'll help you out. We'll look at what your tooling is. We'll make a plan. And I took this from a great presentation I sat in yesterday. Actually, I made a last-minute update. I noticed somebody used the rocket icon with just start. And I really like that. Because, yeah, just get after it. All those great benefits are out there for you today. The program's in place. It's in flight. We've got some lofty goals, and we have a lot of really, really good people behind it helping to accelerate your migration into the Amazon cloud. There's my information. Yep. Thank you.
Cool.
And unfortunately, we're...
I was just going to say thank you very much. We're not going to be taking any questions after this talk, but we do now have Ship It Live, which is about to be starting upstairs, so I would highly recommend that everyone heads back to the... Actually, it's not upstairs. It's in the keynote room. My bad. Everyone heads down to Ship It Live, check out what they built. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming to Summit.